In 1992, after a year that saw 3 royal marriages collapse and a fire tear through Windsor Castle, the family created a group that has never once let an outsider into the room. The Queen herself gave that year its name, calling it her annus horribilis in a speech at London's Guildhall that November. Within the space of 12 months, the marriages of Prince Charles and Princess Diana, and of Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson, had both broken down. Princess Anne's divorce from Captain Mark Phillips became final. Then, on the 20th of November, fire broke out at Windsor Castle and burned for 15 hours, destroying more than 100 rooms. The blaze started when a spotlight ignited a curtain in the private chapel during restoration work and spread quickly through the castle's ancient timber roof structures before firefighters brought it under control. The damage bill alone would have been enough to define a difficult year on its own, without 3 collapsing marriages arriving in the same 12 months. Charles Anson, the Queen's press secretary at the time, later described the moment she arrived back at Buckingham Palace afterward, having gone into her own apartments at Windsor to personally rescue what she could. A small group gathered to offer their sympathies. According to Anson, she looked at them, smiled, and said simply that at least they had saved some of the pictures. Out of that year came the Way Ahead group, established by the Lord Chamberlain at the time, Lord Airlie, who had run the Queen's household since 1984. Airlie was already known inside the palace as a modernizer. He had persuaded the Queen to begin paying income tax voluntarily, and after the Windsor fire, he devised the plan that funded the castle's restoration without drawing on public money. Most notably by opening Buckingham Palace to paying visitors for the first time in its history. He had come to the role from a career as a merchant banker rather than a lifelong courtier, and he brought that outside perspective directly into how the household was run, converting what had traditionally been a largely ceremonial position into something closer to a chief executive's job. His wife, Ginny, accepted the role of lady-in-waiting in 1973, decades before her husband ever became Lord Chamberlain himself, a post she held for decades, giving the couple a rare, unusually long vantage point inside the family's daily life that few outside advisors ever had. The Way Ahead group was a continuation of that same instinct, an informal body where senior royals and their closest advisors could meet twice a year and argue through the family's direction, without any of becoming public record. The group has no fixed membership published anywhere, and the palace has never released minutes or attendance lists from any of its meetings. What is known has come from people who have sat in the room themselves or worked closely with those who did. A description that circulated in royal reporting years later called it the royal family's version of sitting around the kitchen table to work out disagreements and plans for the future. A separate account, more blunt, compared its twice-yearly gatherings to the general meeting of a private company, describing it as the inner sanctum, where decisions get made that no elected official is ever shown. The two descriptions sit oddly together, a family kitchen table and a corporate boardroom, but both point toward the same underlying reality, a body informal enough for real disagreement, structured enough to actually produce decisions that stuck. Not even the Prime Minister, by every account, has ever been told what was actually discussed inside. Some of what has leaked out concerns exactly the kind of decision that never reaches a press release. In the years after its founding, the group reportedly discussed whether to formally downgrade the titles of Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, since neither would grow up to become a working royal. That specific proposal was vetoed. The reasoning behind rejecting it was never made public either, though the general pattern of the group's decisions suggests a preference for changes that could happen gradually and privately, rather than ones that would require an announcement explaining exactly why 2 young princesses were being stripped of a title they had held since birth. A version of the same logic surfaced again a few years later, when Prince Edward married Sophie Rhys-Jones. Their children, it was announced on the day of the wedding, would be styled not as a prince and princess, but as the children of an earl, since Edward had been created Earl of Wessex. The family had found a quieter way to reach roughly the same outcome the group had considered and shelved once already. When Prince William reached adulthood, his own inclusion in the group was read by royal biographers less as an honor than as a signal. Robert Jobson, among others, described it as one more step bringing him closer to the moment he would eventually have to take on the role himself, a private acknowledgement, made in a room with no outsiders present, of a public transition still years away. It fit a broader pattern the group seemed to follow whenever a generational shift approached. Rather than announcing a change in status publicly, the family tended to fold the person into the existing private structure first, letting the significance become apparent only in hindsight. Once observers noticed who was now sitting in a room that had never had a formal guest list to begin with. Lord Airlie stayed in the role of Lord Chamberlain until 1997, when he was given the highest honor available to a royal household servant and stepped back from day-to-day duties. Even after retiring, he was kept on as a permanent lord-in-waiting, a title that meant the household could still call on him when needed rather than treating his departure as a clean break from royal service. He remained close to the family for the rest of his life. In 2023, in his late 90s, he attended King Charles's coronation at Westminster Abbey, seated in the front row of the nave. He was the only guest in the building who had also been present, as a boy carrying his father's coronet, at the coronation of Charles's grandparents in 1937. A single man's presence connecting the way ahead group's cautious modernizing instincts back to a version of the monarchy it had been quietly trying to update for decades. When the BBC revisited the group's history in 2020, it was explicitly framed as evidence that Prince Harry and Meghan's decision to step back from royal duties was not the family's first attempt at reforming itself from within. The parallel was not exact. Harry and Meghan's departure played out almost entirely in public, across interviews, statements, and a Netflix documentary series, while every previous round of the same underlying argument about who counts as a working royal, what titles mean, and how the institution should shrink or expand to fit the moment, had been settled quietly, twice a year, by a group whose full membership has still never been officially confirmed. The family had been having this exact argument, behind the same closed doors, for nearly 30 years already, with no one outside the room ever fully told how any of it had actually been resolved.